they're criminals. Most Republicans right now are criminals, sex predators of some kind, or engaged in defending criminals and sex predators. And I'm not exaggerating.
I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. This is a show about our existence, our place in the world, what it all means, and ways to make it better. From big picture ideas that blow your mind to practical life advice, we explore it all. We amplify the voices of healers, survivors, mystics, disruptors, scientists, creatives, and everyday people like you and me to expand our consciousness and use that awareness to evolve into who we really want to be in the depths of our soul. Humans Amplified. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, please go rate and review the show. And remember to subscribe where you get your podcasts and on YouTube. This podcast is made possible by generous listeners like you. Right now, independent shows like Human Amplified are essential to helping spread truth and keep us grounded in uncertain times. As we move forward on the trajectory we're on, the answers and truth will be harder and harder to find. So, supporting small businesses, local community engagement, and independent media will help. If you feel so inclined, you can donate to help keep this show and our mission of amplifying humanity going by making a recurring or one-time donation of any size at humanamplified.com/donate. For the links mentioned throughout this episode, check the description box on YouTube or the show notes at humanamplified.com/episodes/127. What does being human mean to you?
I have a very Bill Murray answer, which is other people. I feel like the acts that we do for other people, whether it's parenting or, love to your partner or, acts of service in the community, whatever it may be, that those are the things that can really define us beyond and that distinguish us as humans apart from animals. So maybe that's a literal way to think of it too. But
beautiful. Thank you. Everyone, I would love to welcome to the show today, Matt Anderson. He is a communications consultant, owner of Fortify Communications, a political consulting firm in Nashville, Tennessee. Matt works with progressive nonprofits and Democratic candidates. So I am super excited to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah. And just for everyone to know, like Matt and we know each other from college, and it's been about 20 years since we've caught up. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
What else do you want listeners to know about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I joke that I'm a political hack and send a lot of junk mail. But basically what I do as a political consultant is I work with Democratic candidates and help them build their campaigns, and help them with their message and strategy. If James Carville is maybe a famous example, which is not someone I would want to favorably compare myself to in any way, but he's sort of a famous example on the Democratic side that people might know. But that's sort of work. And then I work with out Memphis, and Planned Parenthood of Tennessee as a press and communications consultant. So, their media relations work and a lot of stuff like that I help with. So
awesome. Yeah. And what a time to be affiliated with the Democratic Party.
Yeah. I guess another thing I should mention for listeners, I was elected last year to the state executive committee, which is a little known body. But there's one on the Democratic side and the Republican side in Tennessee that are sort of like the board of directors for the parties. And so you actually run in a primary election to get that seat. So you elect a man and woman from every state Senate, district. So I was elected to that, just last year. And so it's interesting coming in right at the end of the last election. Things are not where you would want them to be on the Democratic side, right? It's sort of like imagine like walking into an empty office, right?
Yeah.
And, the last chairperson just left, and they left the party in good shape financially, but in a lot of ways, we're starting from scratch. Nobody knows what to do now. Really, there's lots of theories, and I'd love to dig into those, but everyone is starting from scratch and building from nothing right now. It feels like because we're in a crisis moment, and I'm not sure people like me say that enough
Mm,
in ways that are breaking through. And I think that's starting to change out of necessity. But I'm
yeah.
digressing here.
No, and that's part of the reason why I was so excited to have you on the show is sort of, the shift in your career to politics. And so I'm going to give a little context for this episode and why you're on the show and then see what you
Sure.
think.
I will say, no, I looked at your guest and wanted to listen to a few, and I thought, is she sure she wants to have me on?
Absolutely.
You have like these great, thoughtful, spiritual people on the show here, and I think there are some connections to that in some surprising ways and things I've seen that I'd love to get into. But
Absolutely.
yeah, no, but I would love to hear more about what I can offer here on being human from a political perspective, which people I don't think of as a human sphere, right? It's so tainted, and people are so cynical now.
Really? Yeah, that's a great point. And so basically, I mentioned earlier that we knew each other in college, but you guys, Matt and I, we were on the newspaper together at MTSU somewhere around 2004, 2005. Matt was editor in chief and I joined as the features editor. And that year of the paper, I would describe it as pretty revolutionary. We ruffled feathers and we started talking about things that made people really uncomfortable. We started doing things differently than they'd ever been done before. And I feel like that coincided with a larger societal shift of changing journalism norms. Like the internet was just growing into its adolescence. Social media was brand new. I mean, like Facebook had just come on the scene. It was a really transitory time. And I think you handled it really well, to be honest. And
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Like you were able to, and it was hard on you, but you were able to hold your own. You were able to keep forging ahead despite like all of this pressure to go back to the way things were. And I feel like we made changes that you believed in and that the other people on the paper believed in. And so it feels like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like these themes have sort of run through your career over the years as you've shifted from journalism to politics. And that's why I invited you on the show today, because we find ourselves in a higher stakes transitory time with the current U.S. administration. The future of not only the Democratic Party is hanging in the balance, but so is our democracy. So, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, I think I've made a lifestyle out of being mad at the people in charge, which I think is what you touched on there. But no, it was honestly a little therapeutic to hear you talk about that time in that way, because I remember it as an utter disaster.
That
Which,
surprises me.
but that's like me being hard on myself, which is my tendency, but, for every time we fell flat on our face, we were doing cool things that people, I think, liked and enjoyed, and so there's a
Absolutely.
lot. If we had those volumes here to look at, we would probably be like, oh my God, what did I write? What was I thinking? And that kind of stuff. But, um,
I've got them all packed away, by the
I,
way, in my garage.
oh yeah, no, next time. So no, I mean, I think we were doing a lot and trying a lot, but I wanted that paper to be exciting for students. We were taught in journalism school to like, what is it? Afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, or I got that backwards. Comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable. And we, did that to the best of our ability, I think. I remember like a sex issue that it landed me on the news having to defend, which was a fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the paper really rallying to the defense of a psych teacher who was getting fired, and like students really cared about him, Dennis Kramer. And for every screw up or misspelled headline or stupid decision, like I'm proud that we were on the right side of those things. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, what do you think about our democracy right now? Is it being dismantled?
100%. And I think they've been planning it out in the open for some time. Tend to believe that Russia is a major influence in our information ecosystem right now and has been for a while. I think you see it now. If you're on Facebook, you see tons and tons of posts that will lead you to believe that these country artists are attacking Beyonce. And me being like an information ecologist, right? I want to know where this is coming from and who did it, blah, blah, blah. And you like, so here's a post. It's like flashy, incendiary, Chris Stapleton, blah, blah, Beyonce. Customarily, they would leave the link out and it would be like in the first comment. Well, you find that and then you go to that link and it'll have like a little bit of text that doesn't say what the headline says. And then there's just advertisements for more trash on the website and no backing it. Anyway, I think this is probably familiar to your listeners, but this trash is just always out there and it comes from a place. And we know the Russians are experts at dividing us. These
Mhm.
KGB tactics go back way back, and Vladimir Putin is a KGB man. He has advisors that have really dark beliefs about whether democracy is where we should be as a society. And the tech right, I think, has started to find those things compelling,
Mm.
where we hear talk about like a CEO monarch. And at CPAC, we've seen that, there was like a third term conference where they're talking about repealing 26th. Is that the right one?
I don't know.
The amendment that bans presidents from having more than two terms. But
Gotcha.
that's neither here nor there. But no, I went way down the conspiracy hole there. But like, these things are real. Like, I read about this stuff every day. It's in major newspapers, and I think people are just so outside of reading the news,
Mm.
right, and don't know where to start. And there's so much out there. Even if you do read sort of the local news, you start to get a picture. Or if you were to turn on CNN, you might get some of a picture. And I don't want to say they're withholding things from you, right? Or they don't want you to know. It's not a conspiracy, but at some point you just have to read the New York Times front to cover, or
Yeah.
the Wall Street Journal, or whatever it is. And that's a full-time job, and people don't do that, right? Like, I'm a person that works in news and communications. So I'm online all day and digest a lot of news. So anyway, that was quite a defense of my answer to your question. But there's a New York Times columnist I read a lot, Jamal Bowie, who I would highly recommend reading, who digests a lot of what's going on with Trumpism. But he's talked about this, how if you just say what's going on in a mixed crowd, you sound like a raving lunatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll take a breath.
Well, and I hadn't planned to ask you this, but since the topic came up of newspapers and digesting the news, how do you even know what is credible anymore?
I usually think about it this way, and this is what I would suggest to people. Don't look for 100% flawless, perfect news source. It's not out there, right? Like, this is like a dark example, but I think about it all the time. The famine in Ukraine that happened in the 1930s, which was a byproduct of USSR policy, no one really knew it was happening at the time, right? So this massive, deadly, millions of people dying of starvation, and no one really knew it was happening, right? So even in the first draft of history, you might not know what's happening before your eyes. But if you can follow the New York Times or the Tennessean or a place where people do what you and I understand, Brandy, from Sidelines days, is objective fact gathering, you're going to be in good shape, right? And I think we've stopped doing that because our social media habits, we expect to find news there, but Meta X, for very various reasons, they've de-emphasized local news in their feeds, and there's so much junk to compete that we just don't see it, right? So you really have to seek this stuff out. If you think about it, when is the last time, and I'm not asking you, but anyone should think rhetorically, like, when's the last time I just went to a newspaper's website and like read some stuff
Mm.
for like 10 minutes? And if the
Yeah.
answer is not in a long time, or I can't think of a newspaper, like, I don't want to guilt you or make you feel badly, but it's like time to catch up here.
Yeah.
There's a big world out there, and unfortunately the weirdos who advise Vladimir Putin have downstream effects in our lives, and are
That are
starting
real.
to,
Yeah.
that are very real and scary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and back to your point on where some of these things are actually becoming compelling to the people on the right. I've heard people say this two-party system isn't working. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even some Democrats say the two-party system's not working and that our systems are broken. Lots of them need overhauls. So I've got a two-part question for you
Okay.
around that. First, is it okay if democracy goes away?
I think that's an easy no.
Okay. What are your reasons?
Yeah, no, look, I'll try to like give some good succinct reasons. Anywhere you I'm really resisting my long answer because it's contra what the right says. But anywhere you see liberal democracies, like we're conditioned not to like big, powerful state governments. But anywhere you see like a big bureaucracy, a big democracy, lots of participation, you don't see atrocities, right? There's freedom. These things go together. That's good for my family. That's good for our community. Like, we understand that, right? That's why I almost resisted your question. It's just so obvious to me.
Yeah.
And I understand people are frustrated with the system or don't participate, and it seems like it's for other people. And it is. There's a lot of corruption, and there's a lot of ways that the Democratic Party doesn't meet that. But at the end of the day, it's what we have. And when you look at a place or an example where there's not democracy, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of harm.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important, and not enough people
Yeah.
are saying that. So things are being dismantled. I feel like they're being dismantled through force. People aren't getting a say. Power-driven agendas seem to be what's behind it. And I feel like you sort of maybe agree with that, since you've been talking about, Putin and all of those things. But those things concern me. Even if our systems do need an overhaul and we need to fix some things, it's concerning. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Do you agree with that?
That the system needs an overhaul.
That it needs an overhaul, and the way it's starting to be
Yeah.
overhauled is bad.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Doge is a disaster. Where I want to go, I would say that a big part of our backsliding, civic backsliding and erosion of democracy is Citizens United, right?
Okay.
That the Supreme Court decision it's been more than a decade. I want to say it was 2011, but that's what added almost unlimited money to politics.
Oh,
And
I didn't
so
know that.
there was already tons and tons of money in politics and influence, right? It's been a problem for a long time, but that's what really made it so that ExxonMobil can pour as much as they want anonymously into these dark money groups, right? And so that influence is what has corroded things, and that's what's begun to touch the Supreme Court is that amount of power and influence
Gotcha. Okay.
when you read about those scandals. So,
Well, so the overhaul, the way things are being done, is sort of power driven.
right, it absolutely is. I mean, these people are crypto bros. So when they talk about wanting to audit Fort Knox, like, let's not kid ourselves, right? This is theft in progress. Elon Musk runs what is it, car company, rocket company, like all this crap. He's regulated by the government. Who do we think he's auditing, right? I mean, it is literal theft.
Yeah.
I've been saying this in meetings with people I work with in the Democratic Party, where we're trying to think through, what's our message? What's our message going to be? Which is I don't know. That's a loaded question to me because I talk about it so much. But the message right now, I think, from a certain perspective on Doge and this government conspiracy, efficiency stuff, they're criminals. Most Republicans right now are criminals, sex predators of some kind, or engaged in defending criminals and sex predators. And I'm not exaggerating. I would love to give you footnotes for the show after this, you
Yeah.
know? And I mean, there is some funny exaggeration here on my part, right? But we could go back to, I'll give just a little anecdote from Tennessee that I've seen in my years of political work and activism. We had a state rep in Tennessee named David Byrd. Have you heard of this guy? Does
Hmm.
that name ring a bell?
It
Yeah.
does.
And this is just a little example, but we keep seeing these examples, and it's just sort of like Matt Gaetz, right? Like we had a state rep from Wayne County who had been a basketball coach and he was on tape apologizing for assaulting these girls. And the Republicans in Tennessee in the legislature had an almost gleeful defense of him, right? I mean, they would give really mild statements, right? But I saw the smirks on their faces because I was there, right? I mean, they enjoyed antagonizing and defending him, right? They made him a subcommittee chair, right? And this has been the behavior of this party for a long time.
Yeah.
I think this is I think how close I've been to it really drives a lot of my activism and commitment to this work. When you see them up close and how frequently they operate and see the patterns, it really, you see just how corroded and corrupt our local democracy has become.
Yeah.
And I do tell people will ask me, friends of mine, what should I do? I want to get involved. And the thing I've started saying is just go to the state legislature and just sit in the audience and watch committees. Just do
Mm.
that for a day and it will change you to see how this place operates and
That's a really good point.
the questions that come before them and the way they're dealt with and handled and to see the looks on their faces and the knowing looks and you start to learn more about the place and you will find things to do from there, right? Like I don't have to give you a list of a checklist of things to do. It stirs your soul in a way that gets you involved.
Yeah.
But I've
Well,
seen that, and those numbers have been growing. So that's
okay.
been that keeps me in it, right? I mean, if you were to ask me why do you not throw up at your hands and give up, and some people do, it takes a toll on you, but continuing to see the numbers grow and wanting to stay around, that's something that drives me.
Yeah, good. Well, and I'm really glad that you mentioned how your proximity to it helps you see the patterns because so many people are removed from that. So I love your suggestion to just go sit in on one of the meetings. But like there's footage of people who just are holding signs, who are literally pulled out by police officers. And I think it made national news last year when Justin Jones and, the Tennessee Three, Gloria Johnson were silenced. Gosh. So what's it been like watching things like that happen?
I mean, I'll go back a little bit. I've been around and watching those committee meetings since 2012 at this point,
Okay.
right? So a little bit about my career. I was in journalism, for a while, as you know, and kind of worked my way up to being a reporter at the Tennessean, and then got the opportunity to be press secretary for the Senate Democrats when that job came open. So that was kind of my break from journalism. But so that started in 2012. And so I'm like 12 years in now of just following the legislature. That's all to say. I've seen those rooms be empty, right? I've seen bad, nasty, horrible legislation passed or just things like common sense, right? Like equal pay will die, 2 to 7 or whatever the number is, right? And it's just an empty room and it feels like no one cares to. And that's an important change I don't think people realize is that since Covenant, those rooms are packed now, right?
Okay.
that
That's
was, I mean,
positive.
that was what you wanted me to know, right? But I wanted you to get us to this hopeful place
Yeah.
of like, it's been anemic for so long that what you're seeing is actually a good sign that people are paying attention and that they're feeling the consequences of your action,
Good.
right? And this stuff does signal to the public something's wrong, right?
Mhm.
And they are dismissed by some as, they're just making noise. There's no value in that. But I think that signal is valuable to run up to the public, right? Something here is not right.
Yeah.
And, back to just coming and showing up, when you're in these committee rooms and you see it happen, when you see someone get picked up and arrested, you can really see how stupid it is, right? If you're just
Absolutely.
catching a clip on the social media, the Tennessee Holler, I want to give them a shout out. Like the work Justin Canoe does has been
Mhm.
huge for this state. But when you see those clips, it's really easy to think, oh, they probably got a little rowdy, disruptive, right? There's usually some ridiculous series of events where the Republicans got nervous or mad or someone laughed at them, right? Just things that, okay, were we a little rowdy or did someone say something out of turn? But like you can handle it, right?
Mhm.
And my point here is they let this stuff escalate needlessly. And, yes, they have a supermajority, but they're also 100% ignoring people
Yes.
who they don't agree with. And these are not fringe views. I like to remind people, yes, Democrats are at rock bottom in Tennessee. 1 million Tennesseans voted Democratic last November, right? That's that's an amount of people. Everyone deserves dignity and respect, right? But if 1 million people are saying something in a state, that should be afforded some dignity and respect in a healthy democracy, right? So I
Absolutely.
do think some of that disruption, like as you raised, is due to them in these cases where, hey, we've heard from 20 kids today who begged us to do something about gun violence, and well, here's some money for locks. And, we'll just hope that this lock does better the next time a shooter comes, right? Like that's not an acceptable answer.
Mhm.
So, I'm sorry someone disrupted your little meeting. Uh, a lot of
Yeah.
people are really scared at school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you raise a good point too that, well, first let me say, like that perspective is so good to hear. Like that the fact that this is happening and we're seeing this happen is actually a signal. It's actually a good thing compared to how it used to be. So
Yeah.
I want folks to take that away from this interview if they don't take anything away from it.
Yeah.
But also, they are ignoring people who don't agree with them. What can people do to be heard or to make a difference when the leaders aren't listening?
Hmm. Back to my pat answer, right? Literally just go and you'll figure it out. But no, I know you want a deeper answer too. You can do, number one, don't start anything. So what I mean is no new groups is something a lot of activists say amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Um, Activists, advocates, I want to be inclusive, but you know what I mean? We'll say people in this work will say no new groups. And that's just because not that every group around is perfect, but everyone's little bitty effort, like sometimes we just need to join and form up. And when you brought up the two-party system, and one thing I wanted to say, address on that just a little bit. Some people I think are progressive, but like not excited to be Democrats, right? Or they're leftists and they don't feel included in the party or whatever it may be. There's a lot of ways the Democratic Party disappoints people. I'll acknowledge that. But in America, we have a two-party system that's like, you could debate changing it all day long, but I think it's helpful to think about our two-party system as containing a more parliamentary system. So if you're one to say, well, I'm this, I'm not or right now, the best thing we can do is contain everyone in a coalition, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in Tennessee, we want to think about that as everyone from Justin Jones to Bill Lee, which, former Republican governor, Justin Jones, activist on the left, but like you could actually imagine a lot that those two might agree on in the current environment, right? And that's the coalition. And I would just urge people, be involved in Democratic primaries. That is the time when you have a lot of agency to affect the party. We haven't talked about my like actual like involvement within the party organizations a lot because it's really like intricate and boring. But if you want to do that and if you want to change the flavor of the Democratic Party or think it's disappointed you in some way, please like get involved there because you would be shocked how wide open county parties are. We're currently reorganizing all 95 of them around the county, just every 2 years per bylaws that happens. And it'll be 10 people in the room. And like, that's the Democratic Party, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
if, for example, you want a more humane position on Gaza represented in the Democratic Party, like, that is a perfect time to go be one of those 10 people in the room, right? And there's, like I promise you, Hillary Clinton is not standing there with her arms crossed, like working against you, right? Like people
Yeah.
will just be glad you're there, right? So, that's kind of a current like thing happening right now. You could get plugged into or even think ahead early next year. We're going to have midterms, but we're going to have Democratic primaries starting in March, right? And so, like, look at who's running, think about running. That's a really good time to like be part of the Democratic Party, which, just like it or not, is the anti-MAGA coalition right now,
Yeah. That's a
electorally.
Right, right. That's a good way to think about it. And just for
Yeah.
our listeners' context, too, we are having this conversation at the end of February. So you're going to hear this episode in March, just so you know. And let me ask you, too, I guess I might be switching gears just a little bit, but I know that you are a consultant for Out Memphis and Planned
Yeah.
Parenthood. What do you know of the atmospheres in those organizations right now in the current political climate?
It's interesting. I talked to a USA Today reporter earlier this week, and he was asking some questions about the atmosphere in Tennessee on gender affirming care, but right, kind of
Mhm.
across the board. And the thing people forget is, we're feeling the brute impact of King Trump right now. But if you were someone in Tennessee who depended on gender affirming care or, youth who relied on that, there was an apocalypse for you like in the last 2 years, right? When these laws started coming down at the state level. And it's good to be mindful of that. So I think people are used to being beaten down.
That's for sure.
And, I know among people who do the work, there's a strong emphasis on self care that I think would probably resonate with a lot of your listeners. And, a good community bond. And, here in Middle Tennessee, we had candidates, mostly women, who stepped up to run sort of post covenant and wanting to see change on gun laws and abortion, but ran in the counties surrounding Middle Tennessee. And they haven't missed a beat and haven't gone anywhere, right? In a way that's hopeful. I've kind of moved around here, but I think there is an atmosphere of self care and people are taking care of each other.
That's good.
And then, I will say for queer youth, there's a real question of, can I live in Tennessee? There's no right or wrong answer. I've encountered people who are getting ready to leave in a month or looking for property, and that's a real thing. And I hope people will step up and support mutual aid and community funds when those things come around. We'll all know people in our networks where that'll come across the board, and that's just truly an important time to give people a few bucks if you can. Yeah, but the other, to speak more directly to your question, I think there's a sense of queer resilience at Memphis specifically. That's something we're trying to emphasize with people, that queer people have been here
Yeah.
for a long time and are not going anywhere and have survived a lot
Hmm.
and will survive whatever comes ahead. And I know queer people of privilege are trying to step up and support people through things like mutual aid that I mentioned, but you know, and then, on the repro side, I know that one thing people need to keep an eye on with the executive orders and DOE, which is, just all a version of Project 2025 getting implemented.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing to watch is family planning money. A lot of that stuff could start to get withdrawn from states. Title 10, which supports, God, I'm so scared I've got the number wrong. But yeah, no, Title 10, family planning funds that go to low income women.
Okay.
Some of that stuff could be at risk.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. Well, so all good things to know, all good things to think about. I'm glad to hear that there's a sense of community and taking care of one another, because that's really important. And this leads me to human rights. They're being violated. They're being taken away. I mean, they weren't all freely given to begin with, I guess, not by our governments anyways.
yeah.
So what would you have to say to someone who believes that our human rights aren't being violated?
I wrestle with questions like that all the time. One hazard of my work is proximity to Republicans. And, I have them in my family, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually hate to be so partisan. I wish we lived in a world where like that wasn't such a divide, but it's there and it's real. But the heart of the question where you have to wonder what is the nature of this person who doesn't think I have rights, right? And you have to interrogate, are they able to understand my rights? Are they able to understand what is happening in the world, right? I've been through a lot of therapy just for personal stuff. And it's not that I feel vulnerable. It's just like, how do I talk about my mother to the public? but like everyone talks about their mom in therapy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one thing my therapist said one day is like, well, what are they capable of, right? And so that's a compassionate way, I think, to answer that conversation. There's a political answer that's a lot more brass knuckled, which I'd be happy to get into, right? But on a human level, you have to like start from a place of forgiveness and imagine what they know about the world. And, are there things they don't know about you that you could share,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's non-threatening? One thing that I hear people say in my work a lot, and it's 100% true. If you don't know someone who's had an abortion, it wasn't safe to tell you, right? Or if you don't know a queer person, it just wasn't safe to tell you,
Yeah.
And I think people don't know that about themselves. It's not everybody's job to explain their humanity to everyone all the time, but you can give someone a gift, if you can help them see a part of you that might change their view of humanity and rights of other people.
Okay. So connecting on a human level and maybe putting yourself out there, if it's maybe safe to do so. I
That's
mean,
right. No, 100%. There are times when it just isn't safe.
yeah.
God, this is coming up more and more where we think about there's so much talk of parent rights at the state level on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is how they're getting at trans issues and things that they're upset about with youth and sex and reproductive health. But
Yeah.
we start to talk about more at a public policy level, like who is a safe adult, right? So, I mean, I just want to speak to that. There are situations where, no, you should absolutely not take the advice I was given. But if you have if it's your brother and it's a safe conversation, right, you can like
Give them that
really give
gift.
someone a gift. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what about the best advice for staying the course as an advocate when things get hard? I know you said early that just being close to the situation keeps you going. What else?
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, and I've seen it kick people's asses just as much, but it can certainly pull you in. But, to sustain yourself, you do build good personal relationships with other people that I think are really rewarding and enriching. in activism. Kind of a weird one, but I mean, just know you're going to fail, right? You're pushing a glacier, at least in Tennessee. I mean, if we want to think about how to defeat Trump and you give me a dry erase board in 15 minutes, we could figure that out, right? But to turn Tennessee around, not just red to blue, but like red to purple to bluish, like that's so hard. You're pushing a glacier. So just know that you're going to fail and you're going to struggle, right? That first campaign that you run, you're going to lose, but you'll build relationships. You'll build infrastructure. You'll do it better next time. That vote that you're pouring all this energy into, like stopping the legislators from voting a certain way, what they're going to do, right? It's that journey, not the destination mentality. And I think you have to have some of that, but I would put a caveat on that I do totally believe this supermajority in Tennessee will end. I think we want to see them as inevitable and think of them that way, and it only serves them. There's no such thing as a permanent majority, no such thing as a permanent president, right? Which we need to talk about more and more right now.
Even if he tries to be, right?
Right. But these things come to an end, and the more people participate, the quicker that will be.
Gotcha. Okay. So join the coalition.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Matt, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think is important to share?
No, I feel like I've been all over the place, but I hope this has been interesting to viewers.
I feel like this has been really helpful, and it's been way more hopeful than I imagined it would be. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it would be so easy to beat yourself down, and I think that stops people from getting involved, right? If you just, I would, if I'm allowed one more digression, but there's a philosopher, historian, Timothy Snyder, who I read a lot, and people might be familiar with On Tyranny. It's the little pamphlet you see a lot, like Don't Obey in Advance. That's Timothy Snyder. Okay. But he's done a lot of work on attention, which is something we're thinking more about now with the rise of social media being the dominant form of media. And the attention economy. Your attention has financial value to people. But in the attention economy, despots like Putin or Trump, these right-wing movements, they want and like for you to have your attention focused on social and consuming that junk media. And it also it actually makes you hopeless in really fascinating ways. But a lot of the questions they use are designed to keep you sort of on a string, right? Think about the wall. Who's going to be it's invulnerable to questions, right? Someone should build the wall. And it stops there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's my long form pitch. Get out there in person.
Yeah. Well, let me throw in there too that if you're hopeless, that means you're less likely to go do something. So it is important to maintain hope.
Yeah. If you're hopeless, they win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Matt, how can our listeners find you and your work?
I am on, I use Blue Sky and Instagram the most for political stuff. M. Anderson, Ville, Mandersonville is the handle there. Fortify Communications, our website's under construction right now, but that'll all be linked up. If you just want to give me a follow, I'm usually commenting on the news there. And thank you for this opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Feel like we've gone to some fun places
in
the conversation, and appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Check out more of our episodes here and at humanamplified.com. Remember to subscribe.